All right. Let's see what we got. Bear with me. All righty. Bear with me 1 second. Hey, Jockey. All righty. Looks like I am here and on and such. All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming out tonight to my monthly Full Moon Madness live stream. Hopefully, I can get all the technical stuff behind the scenes working. So, hey, Weird Fantastic Toy Adventures. Hey, Kurt, Anthony, Timothy. Hey, everybody. Oh, the gang is here. Excellent. So, hope everybody is doing okay tonight. This is probably the last you're going to see the messy dining room back there because I've got a surprise coming, hopefully tomorrow, which will take care of that. That'll show up in the next video or so. Hey, Jared, good to see you. Oh man, before we get started on the topic at hand, I just wanted to do a little housekeeping. In a week or two, I'm going to be in beautiful Lancaster, Pennsylvania, going to Historicon, which is as the name implies, a historical miniatures gaming convention. They haven't done it in the last. They did do it last year, I think, or there was something. I haven't gone to it in the last 2 years, so I'm really looking forward to it. So you can expect a few videos and such coming from there. Oh, thank you. Yes, the T-shirt. Let's give it a whole big thing. Yes, the Sons of Gygax T-shirt. Timothy, you might be closer to the mark than you think. So anyway, if anybody is going to be at Historicon in the next, I guess it's 2 weeks from tomorrow, do let me know, and we're trying to hook up. That'd be awesome. After that, I'm going to be at ShireCon, which is an amazing little one-day convention up in the Berkshires in Connecticut, and I highly recommend it. I will be there as a vendor selling all the new stuff from BRW Games. And let's see, Jared, of my appearance on Lord Gazumba's. Yes, that was a great time. It's always a pleasure to talk with those two. They're such a font of knowledge, and it's a pleasure to hang out with the folks on the channel. So we did in fact have a topic for tonight, and that is the Lands. I will Weird Fantastic Toy Adventures. I will definitely do so. Or if somebody else can post the link to that, it is up on the YouTube. Today's topic is the Lands Beyond the Flanaess. So that's what we got. And what I hold in my hand, of course, is the folio version of the Gazetteer. And this map here gives us our first ever view of what those lands are. Hey, Mobius, good to see you. So obviously over here, we've got the Flanaess, which is very well detailed. We've got the Backloonish Basin here. We've got the Sea of Dust. And off to the sides of the Darlene map, which end about here, we have these different lands that were never really detailed way back in the day. And down here is Hetmanoland. So this was the very first view we got of it. And it kind of laid fallow officially for a long, long time. A lot of people in the fan community, back in the old AOL days, we did a lot of building out and talking about what could it be like. Some folks used the Sagard the Barbarian books, which were these kind of choose your own adventure books, and in them, a couple of them actually had some maps. And it was weird because they kind of started off in Raddick up in the upper northeast corner of the Flanaess, and then they kind of morphed into their own thing, or maybe it started in something and it moved to Raddick. Whatever. There were unique nations that were described in those books, and some people tried to apply those countries to this map. Like down here, they put them down here, and so because if you look at this map now, the implication is that this map kind of just goes a little bit off to the edge, and that's it. That's what most of us thought for like 10 or 15 years, is like, oh yeah, this is Orc, and it goes like that. Well, it turns out that assumption in terms of canon was not exactly warranted, because then came along Dragon Magazine Annual Number 1. And this was, I guess, what year was this? 1996. And this was kind of a celebration of multiple different campaign settings that TSR had published up until then. This was in the time when Greyhawk was kind of out of favor at TSR. And so, they didn't get a lot of treatment in here. It just got a 2-page spread called Beyond the Flanaess. And as you can see, there is a map. There is a map that shows, it's got the Flanaess over here in the corner, and then it's got all this other stuff. And this is where that other map stopped, was about here. And it took it and ran with it. And it went all the way out here. It expanded it out into this ginormous area over here. And you can see a lot of these things are named. If you can, I'll zoom in upon it on you. So there are some names here, and we get little 1-paragraph descriptions of what those nations are. And this was done by Skip Williams, and Gygax had afterwards completely disavowed this map, because it wasn't anything like he had done for Orc, and he just like, that was mine, they made it up, whatever. And yet there are some tantalizing tidbits in here, and that's what we're going to go through this. And thank you, Weird Fantastic. I never remember all of the niceties of YouTube. Yes, please like the video and subscribe and all that other good stuff. Please do. That does help. And in fact, now they've added this little heart icon. I don't know if you can see it below the thing, with a little $sign in it. You can click that, and you can send something to me in the jar, which is always nice. So anyway, I will never. You're much better at reminding me, Weird Fantastic Toy Adventures, and I know you told me your name last time, and I have completely forgotten. But yes, Jared. Now we're getting to the things. The names of these are less than inspired, but something to note about this map is that it is presented as an in-game artifact. And it even specifically says that the names might not be accurate. It's presented as a map that was made by Heward and sent to Mordenkainen, and there's a little note attached. So, my dear Mordenkainen, I'm glad you found my doodles enlightening. I cobbled the map together from diverse sources, mostly the recollections of some of the old guard. I can't vouchsafe the place names. Doubtless the locals have their own names for many of the areas, enclosed are some excerpts from my journals. So they have, Bill, thank you. So they have, the Backloonish Empire, which is interesting because at, in the time of the Gold Box, or the 576 era, the map here has the Baklunish Empire and the Sul Empire, and of course those had been destroyed 1,000 years or more before. So you right now you already know that the map itself and the names and probably some of the descriptions are out of date at the very least. So this is what you call this is an unreliable. Well, Heward is an unreliable narrator, and this map and these descriptions are his unreliable narration. That said, it is canonical. This is what the official published setting looks like, and for better or worse. I mean, I know a lot of people hate this map. I'm not a big fan of the map itself. I mean, it's a big box with triangles stuck on the edges, so I mean, there's no getting around it. It's a terrible, uninspired map. But the lands that it portrays can be a little interesting if you jazz them up a little. Some of them are quite obviously analogous to real world places. For example, we've got Eript, an arid land ruled by a dynasty of priest kings. They changed one name and turned Egypt to Eript. There is Zindia, which is a tropical land where rich cities rise from steaming jungles. Some of you who follow the blog might know I kind of doctored that up a little bit and made it Zahindia, which is closer to the name that Gygax used in his Gore the Rogue books, because he also dealt with nations that are immediately around the Sea of Dust and a little further west. He did do a few name drops on them, so I went with that to use those names. So what I've done is I've kind of taken the map from the folio and this map and kind of mooshed it all together in my own Beyond the Flanaess series of articles, and Zahindia and the Baklunish lands were the first ones that I've done. I'm going to continue that series, but this is really what inspired it all. And you've got places like Ishtar land, which is a land watered by southern storms and at least 2 great rivers. Okay, it's Mesopotamia. The High Khanate, an arid land peopled by 2 tribes of sturdy nomads. This is one of the most annoying ones because we already have the Khanate in the Flanaess. We've got those barbarian nomads in the northern reaches of the Flanaess. We've got the wolf nomads, the tiger nomads, the rovers of the barrens. We already, and they're already called Khans and such. So why Skip thought we needed to take that concept that's already done and kind of copy it elsewhere is kind of weird. Have the Celestial Imperium, which was later rechristened. I think Eric Mona actually was the one who made the connection name-wise. It is now called the Celestial Imperium of Sufang, Sufang being one of the names that Gary name dropped in his Gord the Rogue stories. Thank you so much, Bill. I really appreciate it. Hey, Joe, good to see you. Yeah, Timothy, I know it's you can run exists the Oasis of the White Palm, exactly. But there are some places in here that are really interesting. There is, I know the name sucks, Orkreich. But the idea of having the nation of orcs there as the threat that's being kept out of fantasy China by the Great Wall, because if you look at it, the Celestial Imperium right here, you can see there's like a little wall, like the Great Wall of China, and Orkreich, it keeps Orkreich out of the Celestial Imperium, which I thought was a kind of a neat twist on things. That's there. It also pushes the idea of the humanoids and demi-humans further west, which I like. And Bill, thank you again for the quickie little donation. I really do appreciate it. That's why I have the Patreon and all that stuff. The more money I can raise through things like this and through the Patreon and stuff. Every dollar I'm able to raise that way is $1 time I don't have to spend writing stuff for sale. I can actually write stuff to give away. So I really do appreciate it. It really does help. So anyway, so we've got Orkreich, which I really like the idea of, and especially because it is right on the border of that Backlunish Basin, the western half of that Backlunish Basin. There's opportunities for a lot of interactions between the orcs there and the westernmost Backlunish nations that aren't really covered in the Gazetteer or in the Guide to the World of Greyhawk. In fact, I made some of those connections in my own articles on the Backlunish, which was really neat. Joe, that is, I want to say yes, but make it 90% yes to answer your question. We've also got places that where is it? What am I looking for? The Empire of Lynn, and the Empire of Lynn here is really an interesting bit of lore, because that actually comes from a series of French graphic novels, fantasy graphic novels by Francois Freudval, I think is how it's pronounced. Forgive me if I butchered it. That area, he's also the guy that was one of the contributors, or was supposed to be one of the contributors to Oriental Adventures. That's where you might know the name from. And he also created Kellenin, the hero deity, Prince of Swords, that was later published. And he and Gary were getting along really well. And Gary wanted to include his Empire of Lynn campaign as an official part of Greyhawk. It was supposed to be on its own continent far to the west, or I guess the east if you're going around the globe that way. And it's spelled a little bit differently. It's Lhynn, I think. Excuse me. Yeah, Francois Freudval something. Yeah. Excuse me. But when Gary was tossed out of TSR, those plans went away for including the Empire of Lynn in Greyhawk. So what Skip seems to have done is taken that concept, or at least that name, and included it here in a place where, which is at least analogous to where it would have been had those plans come to fruition. There were a couple of different plans to expand Greyhawk in that way. Aquaria, Frank Metzner's campaign, was supposed to be another one of those additions to the published official Greyhawk campaign out east over the Solnor Ocean, which was kind of neat. And the way they describe Lynn is a sea of burning sands fill most of Oryx's western end. The fabled city of Lynn, perhaps settled by seafarers from the Flanaess, has grown rich from coastal trade and the desert's mineral wealth. That is a bad description of the Empire of Lynn as it's shown in the graphic novels, which is really cool. And you can find some of those graphic novels in print. You can find some of them in PDF format. I mean, they're quite a ways old. They're quite a few years old, so I'm not sure how easy it's going to be to track them down nowadays. But they are out there. It is possible to find some of them. Most of them are obviously in French, so finding a translation is kind of hard. But the physical way it's described, and positioned here, fits sort of kind of with the way that Freudval had it set up, which I thought was a neat little bit of continuity. This isn't Skip didn't just throw this together at random. There was some very, he did some thought. He put some thought into it. So I do appreciate that a lot, that he did take that time to think about it. Just going to catch up on the comments here. Caratu. Whoa, I'm okay. Thanks for coming Beyond the Flanaess. Dave Shepard, hey, good to see you. Yes, we're getting to Chris Promises. It's coming. Give me a few minutes. We are definitely getting there. The gold box St. Cuthbert is the box that had these books in it. It was the later reissue of the World of Greyhawk. After the folio, it had a lot of the stuff, a lot of material from Dragon magazine was incorporated into that, and they republished it, colloquially known as the gold box. Let's see. Have you? Yes, Bill. I am no longer with the dreaded plague. So yes, all is well. It was an unpleasant 2 weeks, but it's long since passed. Yeah, exactly. Drive through. The POD. I haven't seen the POD. I mean, I've got a couple of copies, and obviously some of mine are less than less than whole, so I might just spring for a POD version of the books there. French and the good price. Okay. So Nordic Maelstrom, I think your answer was already covered up. It looks like it's going for around $60 to $100. So anywho, so that's where we stood here in '96. Now, after this came out in 2001, they decided to come out with with a fantasy skirmish game. And they used the name Chainmail because that obviously evokes the original Chainmail game from the 70s. They created a setting for it with different factions, and because in modern in skirmish games of that type, it's nice to have identifiable factions with different abilities and stuff, and that way you can sell sets of different figures that match those factions and so forth. There was an undead faction, an elvish faction, there were dwarves, there were humans, there were gnolls, there were a couple of there was a drow faction, and it was interestingly though, it was set in the northwest corner of Ulrich, so it's set over here. And I don't have a print copy of it, so I can't hold it up to the camera. And unfortunately, I know of no way to have YouTube display a screen that I have open. But the areas that are in the chainmail setting, the geography of it matches pretty damn well with the names that they have set up here. So that the island here and all this stuff, they've got the Elvanian forest and the kingdoms of the marshes and the elven lands and so forth. There are it's very easy to plug all this stuff in to the to the map that came with Chainmail and vice versa. And in fact, I did that on my blog. I have a whole set of maps Beyond the Flanaess, which I'm in the process of redoing as I go through my own Beyond the Flanaess stuff. I'm redoing those maps, and that's why you can't get the big blown up versions anymore, just the thumbnails. It's because I'm redoing them, and they'll be in much better quality. So it'll take a while, but I am getting there. And I actually talked to Chris Promise about that, and briefly here and there online and such. And I think that if you take away the skirmish game and you take away the kind of contrived factions idea, the setting itself is a really nice RPG setting. And the way they had it set up is there was an Iridian god, Stratus, who was the god of war, and he was the brother of Hextor and Hieronymus. So where Hextor was lawful evil, lawful good, Stratus was lawful neutral as just the god of war, and he had his panoply of magic items and so forth. And a bunch of adventurers killed Stratus, hoping that by doing that they would war. And that failed miserably, and his weapons and his armor and everything fell to earth and were collected by these factions. So now the factions are squabbling over the panoply of Stratus, which is the MacGuffin for the game. It's a nice setup, but it's kind of contrived, like I say. But the setting itself for a straight RPG setting is really cool, because you've got these very unique elven cultures, because the elves used to have an empire that covered most of the area, and then they were beaten back. That's why it's called the Sundered Empire, is because the Elvish Empire, flew apart. There's some very unique human cultures. There's a very unique dwarven culture, which is kind of like a socialist republic kind of thing. In terms of a setting, it works out well. Plus, that the details of the Sundered Empire setting kind of end where the Empire of Lyn begins. So it takes a little bit of stitching together, but you can make it work where you have the Sundered Empire and then the Empire of Lyn from the Freud-Wahl graphic novels, and it works. So that whole area of northwestern Ulrich, according to the map, really it works from the sources that they were stitching together, which I thought was a very cool thing. All right, let me go back to the comments here. The Dragon Annual map is yes, Matthew, we covered the fact that it sucks. It is nonetheless what we have to work with. I would also be curious as to see what the worst one is, Matthew. Let's see. Drive through. Okay, we're talking about the gold box there. Yes, StreamYard. I know I'm behind the times when it comes to technology. I'm lucky. I actually have a camera and a mic that aren't on my laptop, so I'm a little slow to adopt to the new sexy software stuff. Let's see, the absolute, the Gazetteers, sure. Pluffett Smetter, hey Pluffett Smetter, good to see you. Nordic Maelstrom, they always see that. It's an interesting observation, Nordic Maelstrom, about the Elven Empire's crumbling. It's like they just because they live so long, the rules just kind of get tired and give up. So it's weird. Dave, I hear I've been buying not the miniatures, but I've got a decent collection of the books. I still need the core rules, though. I still don't have that in my collection, which is annoying. All right, let's see what we got here. Gary. I mentioned that Gary, that Gygax didn't have any kind words to say about the Dragon Annual map, but like I say, it's not a great map aesthetically, and it's not what Gary's map looked like, but it is the map that we have to work with. So that's where I approach it. Let's see. Kaolan's Empire. Well, it's the Kaolan's Empire is an interesting idea, because it didn't have the Empire for very long, and it didn't seem to fall because of any particular the big war or conquest or anything. It's just the peripheral parts of it just said, no, go away, we don't want you anymore. And Kaolan said, okay. So it was like a very peaceful end to the empire of Kaolan. So anyway, those are, that's kind of a history of the of what we've got published beyond the Flanaess. And as I mentioned, I've done some work myself on the blog with a lot of the free downloads on Zahindia and the rest of the Backlunish lands, and I'm slowly working my way out. Right now, the next thing I'm working on is the armies of the Flanaess. So the going beyond the Flanaess will wait until the armies are done, and then I'll probably pick up and keep going westward, probably into the Celestial Imperium area. Because the way I've got one big master map, and working my way out is much easier than kind of jumping around, because then I'd have to stitch together everything to put it back together, and that would be just a pain. Would Gary Gygax have filled out the rest of the world? It's hard to say. I mean, ideally, Gygax's intent seems to have been he wanted to farm out the other areas of Earth to other authors. So that's why he was going to make Aquaria, Menster's campaign setting. That was going to be part of it. We already saw the Spindrift Isles was, Len Lakofka's thing was already incorporated into it, and that probably would have been built up more with a lot of modules and stuff like that. We were going to have Francois Freudval's. I won't. You know who I mean. His stuff was supposed to be in it, so I imagine that I was going to that we would have seen just a lot more authors brought in to handle different areas of Earth, which I think would have been really nice. You would have had a lot of different voices. I'm sure he would have had a strong editorial hand on it, but I like the idea. People all bringing their own unique contributions into making the fantasy world. Obviously, TSR went into a different direction, but there we go. Let's see where we are now. A lot of what he did was based on Earth cultures, self-consciously, but a lot of them weren't. I mean, you don't really see, obviously, like Paranland is Switzerland, but when you then the yeomanry, there's no real straight earthly analog for the yeomanry or the Hold of the Sea Princes, or something like that. And a lot of these are more generically European, rather than being modeled on a specific country, it seems to me. Like Furiondi, Nairon, Sundi, those kinds of places. You don't really get a sense that, this is France and this is Spain and this is this. If anything, the Great Kingdom is probably most analogous to the Holy Roman Empire, with its mostly semi-independent vassals and so forth. But I don't really get the sense that most of the things in the Flanaess have a specific culture in mind. Although obviously the Sul barbarians in the Thelronian Peninsula do, down to that you can tell that one's Sweden, that one's Norway, that one's Denmark. So it's a mix, but I think on the whole it's more generic fantasy Europe than anything else. How am I going to handle the Flan majority nations, Jared? In terms, I see. With the armies of Greyhawk, I haven't really decided yet. Bear in mind that even though the ancient Flan people are kind of American Indian-esque, by the time you get to here, culturally and technology wise, they are much more advanced than Indians were. So they're up to medieval technology as much as anybody else. So they're probably just going to have the same sorts of weapons and armor and tactics as their neighbors. Let's see where we are from here now. Matthew, I am Gilnor from RuneScape. Is that the worst map? I'm honestly, I confess, I'm not a big RuneScape person, so I don't know what Gilnor is or looks like. I will take your word for the fact that it is the worst. How much area around Blackmoor? Well, I mean, the falling out of Dave Arneson with Gary is both early and catastrophic. I don't think it's even possible to run a scenario where Arneson and Gygax got along and cooperated like that. I don't think that was ever going to happen. Their temperaments, from what I've read in all different accounts, that was just not in the stars. I mean, Gary included Blackmore and the Duchy again, and then later said, "Well, I liked the names." I mean, okay. Let's see. Here we go. Let's see. Nordic Maelstrom. Imagining. All right, the Elven Empire thing. On Dangerous Journey. Well, I don't know if you can see, but in the on the middle shelf there on the left, there's a whole Dangerous Journeys right there, and I don't incorporate it necessarily into my Greyhawk, but I absolutely incorporated it into Adventures Dark and Deep. And for all of Gary's protestations to the contrary, you could really see where some of the stuff was taken directly from his notes for the second edition of D&D, AD&D. Some of the skills that are in Dangerous Journeys just map too perfectly to the way that stuff works in AD&D first edition, and so that's kind of when you really pour into it up to your elbows, looking at it mechanically, doing the math and so forth, it's in there. But as far as incorporating the setting stuff, I really haven't gone into it in that much detail. I was looking more at the mechanical end of it, so I'm not really. So I can't really speak to it. Although now that you mention it, it's probably worth looking into. Still has the mantle of the best. Thank you very much, our esteemed Pluffet Smedger the Elder. Is it the elder or the younger? I don't remember which one you are. Is making reference to my article in Dragon Magazine back in the day in the 90s about the Pomarch. So I am still to this day astounded that people remember that article. But thank you so much. It's very nice to be remembered. The One True King. Visit the Pomarch and die. Yes, exactly. There's a lot of intrigue with the Valley Elves. Gabrielle, hello. Welcome. It's a long way from Uruguay. The Elven Empires, Gabriel, the Temple of the Frog and the Blackmore supplement. Yeah, exactly, Timothy. I think you're right. That's and that is our esteemed Louisiana has made an appearance on the Cat Condo. Yeah, so so there's that. So in terms of Beyond the Flanaess stuff, there are other continents also. A couple of them are mentioned in the Gord the Rogue books as pretty much just names. They don't really give any details to them, and there's an interesting conundrum because the number of continents that are mentioned is different in the Gazetteer and in the books. And if you look here, this is kind of Monoland here is supposed to be its own continent, and then the Flanaess is a continent, but the rest of Oerk is also a continent, and Hyperborea, and this over here in the corner, this seems to match up with this, but we don't really know where it is. And then there's another continent down here. So the number, when you start to line up the number of continents that we know are called continents and the number of continents that we're told there are on the planet, doesn't really jive. So at that point, you're starting to get into the idea that when Gary left TSR, those kinds of details were kind of abandoned because nobody had that kind of institutional memory of what Greyhawk was supposed to look like. So different authors kind of went on their own for this kind of stuff. Well, remember too, Jared, the Flan weren't necessarily always overrun. This is one of my favorite little tidbits about the about the migrations. This map here, if you look at the migration map, the little hatch mark areas are the Flanaess, right? So you've got up here, you've got this migration of Iridians that go in and in, Irinians and Backlunars that go in and then kind of bounce off of the Flanaess that were there. So and they seem to survive in little isolated outposts otherwise. But it's not fair to say that they were always pushovers, because at least in the upper northern reaches, they were able to fend off the invaders. Hey Satori, good to see you. How are you doing? And let's see. Oh yes, the Sons of Gygax shirt. Yes, it's a big hit. We're gonna given the old faith seems to be Druidic. Yes. Well, it's again. Andrew, hey Andrew, by the way, good to see you. It's kind of it's never an easy thing to try to assign specific cultures, specific groups or nations in the Flanaess. A couple of them we touched on earlier. A couple of them are spot on. You know, parent land is Switzerland, kind of thing. But when you get to the rest, it's much more of an amalgamation of a lot of different things, which is one reason that the Beyond the Flanaess map seems a bit lazy in parts, because it's mostly one-to-one analogies with real world cultures and nations. So so in that sense, this does that a lot more than the original Flanaess did, which is kind of interesting. Okay, we're talking about that. The sources are a bit inconsistent. Yeah. Well, yeah. Bear in mind, Jared, the stuff on the different races and stuff that was originally published in Dragon and then got later put into the gold box, to the guide to the World of Greyhawk, and the glossography. Yeah, it's simplistic is a word. It's a rectangle with some triangles stuck onto it. But it's kind of grown on me over the years, and as I've said a couple of times, it's what we've got to work with. So I would rather go with that. I mean, I did do actually an alternate version myself on the blog as kind of a thought experiment of what it would have looked like. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, you've got an entire setting that is set in this map. The Sundered Empire is up here, and it's almost as big as the entire Flanaess. So you've got an entire canonical part of the setting is kind of relying on that map. I'm not going to throw it away, although I'm on my own. I might just try to jazz it up a little, make the inlets a bit bigger and more interesting, because that's one of the things that I think makes a really good fantasy map. And this goes back to what Matthew was talking about, bad fantasy maps. When you look at a map like Conan's Hyborian Age, or Middle Earth, the maps themselves are really boring. It's just you've got one long coastline with character to it, maybe a few islands out, straight line mountains, and that's about it. It's all of the, which is not to say that the settings themselves aren't interesting, obviously, because they're made for literature, and it's the story is the center. But I find personally that something like the Flanaess, which has a very interesting, intricate coastline, if you notice, or something like the Wilderlands of High Fantasy has exactly that same sort of thing. I mean, that the coastline goes all in and out and everywhere, and it's got a lot of seas and mountains and things like that. When you have an interesting geography, I think it necessarily helps the at least in my case, it helps me imagine more of the different possibilities, because when you have something like Middle Earth or Hyperborea, it's just a straight line, and I don't get a lot of stuff, and that's one thing that the Forgotten Realms does really well. It's got the straight line thing, but then it breaks in. It's got that Sea of Fallen Stars right in the middle, and that gives you that kind of interesting geography that I'm kind of talking about here. So some of the classical fantasy settings are a little bit dull when it comes to the geography of them. Let's see where we are here. Yes, Cal, Perrinland is indeed named after Jeff Perrin. There are a number of different, if you look at the name, number of different TSR alumni, and Gary's friends are obviously is Jim Ward. There's a whole bunch of things in there like that. Am I having connection issues? Is everything alrighty? Because I've not noticed any connection issue on my end. Is all well? Take it easy, Anthony. It was great to see you. Thanks for stopping by. Well, yeah. Well, if one is looking straight on medieval fantasy analogy, then chivalry and sorcery was the original one. And in fact, I've got a whole collection of that over there too. I love those back in the day. I mean, that's endless tables of how to set up a realistic 14th century manor system. I mean, it was freaking amazing. Let's see the Greyhawk novel. Yes, yeah, that's right, Timothy. I remember that from the when he's selling him the dagger. It has a Dwemer. Don't you know what a Dwemer is? Yeah, I remember that. When he's selling the weapon to Gord. Orc being 2 or more continental plates. Well, that I think makes a lot of sense, especially when you look at. So this is Dave asking this question. When you look at the mountain range here, this huge mountain range that is the edge of the continent in this book, but here it's just like this big dividing line. And I think if you look at this as an uplift mountain range, then you are going to see two plates colliding. You might get a little bit of that. I mean, I'm not an expert in tectonics at all. When you see large lines of mountain ranges, that's what you're looking at usually, and you get that here with these mountains on the western edge of the Flanaess. So I think you definitely could be seeing something like that, and maybe because these are not nearly as massive as these. These would probably be a younger, if I'm remembering my geography classes, my geology classes from college. Well, I apologize if the stream is a bit off in places. I'm sorry if that's on my end. Unfortunately, nothing I'm able to do about it. I'm sharing the bandwidth with She Who Must Be Obeyed. All right, so yeah, you're not wrong with the Islamification of the Baklunish. In fact, that's one reason I deliberately wanted to give them a more polytheistic pantheon when I did my Baklunish stuff on the blog. I actually went back to pre-Islamic pagan cultures in Arabia and the region in order to give the Baklunish a little more of a unique feel. In fact, that's why I put the emphasis on the idols, with the idea that because Islam is so anti-idolatarian, that I wanted to make the Baklunish very idolatarian. So they, the idols themselves are central to the Baklunish religion, and that's why I did that. I wanted to specifically distance the Baklunish from Islam and Muslim cultures. But you're absolutely right. Later on, it's kind of gotten more and more in that direction, which is, you know, you can't. It's not like you can blame them. Although it's also not nearly as bad as it is in the Forgotten Realms. With what's it called? I forget the Arabian thing in the realms, but that one was much worse in terms of Islamization. Good. Okay, politics. Yes, with the yeah, exactly. The genie, the genies have a strong association with that kind of culture and with um uh, uh and with core elements, you know, with the really does give you a crutch. Although also don't forget have the character of Al Akbar, who was in the setting from a very, very early stage where you have the cup and talisman of Al Akbar. You know, so you do have those elements of, you know, oh, there's a great prophet and so forth. So it's not like it wasn't there waiting in the wings already, but I think it's worth, you know, spreading it a little thinner. In France, they were taking, oh, right, yes, the Living Greyhawk Ekbir. Yeah, I can imagine. I don't know nearly enough about. Well, no, let me put that a different way. I know exactly as much about Living Greyhawk as I care to. I'm not an expert on it by any means. One of these days I'm going to have to get into that deeply, but because I know a lot of people love Living Greyhawk, I know that, and I respect that. So anyway, we are about 10 minutes out of our allotted hour. So I will open the floor. Does anybody have questions or any other points you want to talk about? If we'll ideally, if they're about Lands Beyond the Flanaess, that would be great. Oh, there is one other land beyond the Flanaess that we haven't talked about yet, and that is Fireland. Fireland is off in the northeast of the Filronian Peninsula. And we see it on the map, I think in the Living Greyhawk Gazetteer, if I'm not mistaken, has that on there. And it's sort of like there's not a lot of detail around it, but you get the impression it's sort of like Iceland was to Scandinavia, sort of like a distant outpost of Sul culture and so forth. So someone I know is very interested in that region. And you know, so I'm kind of laying low on it myself, but we shall see. So anyway, that is what I have on the Lands Beyond the Flanaess. Anybody, any questions? Any other? It doesn't have to be about that. Any other topics folks want to discuss? We've got still got about 7 minutes to go before I need to log off myself. But I know I've had fun. Have I read Necropolis? I have Necropolis back there in the shrink still. I haven't. I also have the Hall of Many Pains there too. I haven't gotten up to actually ripping open the shrink yet. So no Cutterjoggy. I have not read it, but I do own it, and eventually I will succumb to the temptation and I will break it open. But no, I have not. What is I know it's kind of an Egyptian-y thing, right? If I'm not, you know, or am I conflating that with something else? Yes. Okay. So it's not me busting out. If you're watching this, I didn't. And I know somebody, and I forget who. But take care, and I will see you next month. So I know somebody was working on a Kaoland thing. They wanted to do something similar to those second edition books. You know, the I Use the Evil and Ivid the Undying and the Marklands. Somebody was working on one of those types of books for Kaelan, and I can't remember who it was now. They are indeed Satori. They are rare. 10 years ago, they just, for whatever reason, they really picked up. I every once in a while, I still stumble across one or two in a used bookstore or at a library sale, and I will always snatch it up just because I want reading copies. But it's they didn't make a lot of them. Well, I take that back. Ben Riggs would know how many they actually published, I think, at least of the first couple. But I get the impression that there weren't a zillion of them published, especially compared to, like, Forgotten Realms books. And I know New Infinities didn't publish a ton of theirs either. And obviously we had that one hardcover of Saga of Old City, but that was only in print for less than a year, I think, before Gale took the license away. So no, they really are that rare. And if you find them in any format, even if the spine is all white, I would pick it up because they're just delicious to read. Oh yeah, I have exactly. I have the entire run. Oh man, I wish. No, yeah, it's they're really cool. Yeah, I will. Emiliano, yes, I will absolutely do that. Especially if I ever, because we do have. Let's not forget, we've got Eric here. That would Acropolis would be a nice way to plug into that. It's not like it's an obvious name or something. Yeah. Well, Dave, you are correct, except for the first two. The first two were obviously published by TSR, and the rest of the Gord books were published by New Infinities. And New Infinities, I actually did a job interview for them once, right after, like, I think 87 or something. I wasn't even out of college, and I went into New York City when they were at the Toy Fair and interviewed with them. And they were all about Cyborg Commando at that time, which, my God, so yeah. So it's probably for the best, honestly. But those books, those novels really were cool. Let's see here now. So anyway, we are rapidly approaching 8 o'clock. So last call for any questions or comments or anything like that. And I will call it a night. But what do I think of the theory that the Dragon Annual map is a historical map that shows? Well, yes, actually, Dave, I did cover this at the very beginning when I first did it, because is in universe. It's an in universe map, and it shows it's labeled the Baklunish Empire and the Sul Empire. So at least some of it is out of date, according to what Heward sent to Mordenkainen. So yes, it's absolutely what I call an unreliable narrator when it comes to detail like that. In the note that accompanies it, he even says, he stitches it together. He's not sure of the names and stuff. So absolutely, at least parts of it are far out of date because they name empires that don't exist anymore. So you're entirely right there. So anywho, thank you all so very much for coming out tonight. I had a blast as usual. I hope you did as well. And I will see you again next month for another live stream. I hope the earlier time works out better for you guys. It seems like we got a few more people than we have in past months, so that's a good thing. Please remember to like the video. It really does help on the old YouTube-y thing. If you're not subscribed, please do subscribe. I have videos coming out every Thursday and every Sunday. I've got a quick adventure hook. I'm currently on the blog doing the Armies of Greyhawk. Those will be coming out on, I'm not going to promise those are coming out every week, but you know, there's always a Tuesday blog post, whether or not it's a free download like that or not. I can't promise, because they do take a while to put together. But anyway, hope you've had a blast. I really have. And I will talk to you all later. Oh, Dr. Urias, I'm sorry, we are just wrapping up, but thank you for coming by. And incidentally, for those who want, Tenkar over at Tenkar's Tavern is just starting his live stream. So if you guys want to zip over there and do a bit of a raid, please feel free. And anyway, hope you have a great night. Hope you had fun with this. Please check out the blog. Please check out the other videos on this channel. If you're inclined, hit the Patreon. And thank you all very much. I will talk to you later. Have a great night, everybody. Bye.